Hey everyone, welcome to Love with Francesca, where we deep dive into relationships, self-love, and the empowering journey to authentic connection and healing. Today, I will be interviewing Evelyn. I'm so happy to have her here. She so graciously agreed to have me on her podcast initially, and that's where we got to meet. So, welcome, Evelyn. Thank you for being here.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I just realized my best friend's baby is also called Evelyn, and I'm like, how cute is that? It's such a beautiful name.
Thank you. I never
Yeah,
get to meet other Evelyns.
really.
No, I literally in my life, I've known one. And
Hmm.
ironically enough, when I graduated college, I sat next to an Evelyn Hernandez. We had the same first and last name. I was like, okay, eh,
You're like, okay, doppelganger, here we
yeah.
are.
Oh, I love that, cutie.
So the reason I so wanted to have you on here isn't just because you so graciously invited me to yours, but because I feel like when we were chatting, I really resonated with
Mm.
your message and just so much more. So let's get into that. So just so everybody knows, you are a mindset mentor and wellness coach dedicated to empowering women to prioritize their self-worth, reclaim body confidence, and establish transformative legacies for their children and beyond. With a passion for guiding women towards authentic self-discovery, Evelyn will prepare you to enter a liberating journey of self-awareness and self-acceptance, paving the way for a life rooted in alignment and authenticity. Together, you will blaze trails toward a future where self-worth is celebrated, intuition is honored, and generations thrive. How beautiful is that? I really loved your
Get
emphasis
chills.
on your legacy and
Mm.
especially thinking about that around like women. Um, this is so not where I was going to go with this, but I like where my intuition is taking me now that we're on the
Mm.
topic of intuition. But I was just on the phone with my mom the other day, and my mom had a career in a traditional sense. She was an interior designer. She's a very creative person. And then she went to help my dad with his career, and then she took a step back from all of that to take to raise my sister and I. And then she did like a bunch of really cool things along the way. Like she became PTA president, board president at my school. She led the strategy for the growth of my school. She ran so many events, did such an incredible job, had so many passion projects along the way. Now she has like a whole ass like vocation in the bonsai world in Latin America. Like who would have thought? And I realized talking to her, I'm like, oh, there isn't a word for people like you who, in a
Mm.
sense, do have a career in the sense, like in a creative way and an event management way. She's had a career, but it's not in the typical traditional sense. So I love the fact that just encouraging, and I'm sure there's so many women that can relate to that. Like they've done so many things, but it's not recognized in a certain way because they were also moms at the same time. So I love that emphasis of like, what is your legacy? Like, what is the transformation that you're bringing to the world? Because there are so many women having so much impact. It's just not defined in the traditional way that society defines
Yeah.
career and impact.
Mhm. I think
What are
that's
your
one of the
thoughts about
most
that?
empowering feelings. But I think when I think about that, that feels empowering but exciting too, because you literally get to redefine success, redefine legacy, redefine career, all while redefining you, right? Like, because really the whole journey that we're on in life, I believe, is one of learning the lessons that help us unlearn the things that took us away from ourselves. So essentially, growth really is about homecoming. It's about reconnecting with yourself and your soul and your spirit. Um, but I think when you're a mom, you start to look at it so differently. Like, I recognize that everything that I go through and everything that I heal through is for me, but it's not about me, right? Like I go through it and I get to reap the benefits of the internal work that I do, but I also get to liberate my children. I also get to look at my daughters and watch them be released from the burden of carrying my pain, right? I get to watch them be raised by someone who is so fully self-accepting that they don't have to worry about my judgment or my expectation of who I believe they should be. And I get to just nurture who they are, right? So while I'm working on me all the time, I'm also just embracing who they are and not trying to mold them to be who I think they should be. So
Mm.
it's just so, it feels so empowering to know that just by working on me, I am setting them up for a life that's rooted in self-trust, right? And self-acceptance and like this confidence and comfort and groundedness that they have literally just for existing. I think like that's the one gift that I have given them is that value and just value in general, worthiness, acceptance, and love are not things you have to earn. They're yours simply because you exist, right? But I had to learn it for myself first. So I feel like what your mom did for you by doing things not traditionally and not sitting in the work setting that 9 to 5, right? A label of, I don't know, teacher, secretary, whatever it is. She literally just opened up the door for you to be able to live life and define success for yourself on your terms. Not because maybe she didn't even necessarily have those conversations with you, but you watched her,
Mhm.
right? So you were
Yeah.
totally opened up to this whole different world where you
Yeah.
get to choose for you.
That's so true. That's really true. I love what you just said. You mentioned that the work that you're doing on yourself is for you, but it's not about you.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that? Because that just kind of gave me chills a little bit.
It gives me chills too. I think about this, right? People talk all the time about generational trauma. And I like to think that the reverse is also true. Where there is generational trauma, there can also be generational healing. And I seriously believe that in real time, the work that I do on me, the poise and confidence and groundedness that I feel allows women directly near me to just be at ease. They get to just be themselves, right? So my work directly creates a ripple on women near me. That's the first part of it. But the second part of it is my healing is shaping the way my daughters think, which is literally changing their minds and their bodies at a cellular level. When you think about it like that, the healing that you do today not only impacts your children, but changes them physically, chemically, cellularly, where my healing will be pulsing through generations of women's veins that I will never meet,
Mm.
right? So it
Mhm.
is for me because I deserve to feel good now, but the benefit is so much bigger than me. It's so
Mm.
much bigger than me.
Mhm.
That's what I mean
Mhm.
by that.
That makes a lot of sense. I've been very blessed with a dad who um, is a career coach, and he's very spiritual, and he has, I've learned a lot from him, and he always says to put your ego at the service of your soul.
Mm.
And I never, it's a very profound concept, right? You can kind
Yeah.
of intellectually be like, okay, whatever. What does that mean, right? But I feel like what I just heard from you is literally putting your ego at the service of your soul and your
Mhm.
mission of like, yes, I deserve all of this healing and nurturing and caring and, everything that comes with that. And at the same time, by feeding myself that, nurturing myself that, I am in service of other women and a much greater mission of helping liberate other women from all the constraints that maybe I was, were imposed on me at some point
Yeah.
in my life. And how
Yep.
beautiful is
Mhm.
that?
That's exactly it.
Oh, okay. So one of the things I wanted to chat with you about today, and I feel like we just set the perfect foundation
Yeah.
for it, is body confidence. So I know you
Mhm.
define yourself as an anti-diet coach, and
Mhm.
um I didn't go into my coaching doesn't specialize in dieting or anything like that, but personally, I very much relate to the work that you do. It's something that I've had to unlearn and relearn, let's say, like intuition, body confidence. Can you talk to us about what inspired you to do the type of work that you're doing and maybe just like break it down for us a little bit? Like, how do
Mhm.
you help the women that you work with?
So I would say the inspiration literally came from my lifelong struggle. I was a super athletic kid who was generally thinner, a little muscular, but it really didn't matter how good I did in school. It didn't matter what type of a human being I was. The one thing that I got accolades on for all the time was what I looked like. I remember being as young as 11 years old and hearing one of my aunts say, if you want to get a man in your life, you better stay this small forever. Finger pointing and everything, you better
Hmm.
stay that
Hmm.
small forever because
Hmm.
once you get fat, nobody's going to want you anymore. Um, I remember in high school I was a softball pitcher, and my cousin's husband said, like, you need to like let go of these sports because you're getting too muscular and no dude wants a chick that looks butch, was his wording. And it's little things like that, right? That always led me, even when I was younger and I didn't know what physique looked like. I didn't understand the attractiveness of a body. I just knew I had one, right? Like it made me win races against the kids at recess. Like that's what was important to me. But
Yeah.
even not recognizing what it meant as far as society's definition of a body, um, I started to make connections that there was something important about smaller frames and positive responses from other people.
Hmm.
So I learned very young that in order to continue to receive the attention that I got, then that meant I needed to maintain that body that I had. Um, so that thinking right there made it very easy for me to try my first diet in college. And I lost weight immediately, of course, because I was 19 and had never dieted before. So weight fell off very quickly. Um, and then I gained weight back very quickly, of course, and then repeated that cycle for 19 years. 19 years of constantly trying new programs, restricting, telling myself that I was eating healthy, that I was disciplined, and I wore that like a cape. Look at me,
Yeah.
look at what I can do, right? Um, and it wasn't until that, I became a mom, and becoming a mom for me was not easy. I had two losses, one very early and one midway through pregnancy. Um, and I remember saying to God, if you gift me the ability to be a mother, I won't just be a good one, I'll be an exceptional one, right? And when I had my daughter, my first daughter, it was February 2009. And I remember the doctor like laid her next to me and I heard her cry. That was the first time that I let myself believe I was going to be a mom. Because even through my whole pregnancy, I was anticipating someone telling me, I'm sorry, she's gone.
Yeah.
But when she screamed, it was like life got breathed back into me, right?
Mm.
And I was so grateful, and I just kept thanking God and thank you. And I'm gonna do this for you, and I'm gonna do this for her, and I'm gonna do this for me. And I was so intentional about the way that I raised her, but I didn't recognize until much later that I was raising her to love herself, to focus on her character, to accept every part of who she was, and to recognize that she has so much more value than what she looks like. But I wasn't living that way for myself, right? So I could not possibly raise a strong, confident, self loving daughter from a place of insecurity. And that's where like all of my work changed and I started to learn a lot about where my disconnect came from,
Mhm.
why I trusted other people's opinions about what I should do for my body over my own,
Mhm.
why I ignored my body all the time, especially when it came to food. If you think about if we're thirsty, we get water. If we're tired, we go to sleep. If we have to use the bathroom, we go use the bathroom. But if we get hungry, we say, oh, Francesca told me I shouldn't eat for 4 hours, so I should wait, right? So
Yeah.
food is the one place where we question ourselves.
Mhm.
right? So the work came a lot from me recognizing where I disconnected from myself, and then finding a coach who was able to guide me toward reconnecting with myself. Um, and that's when I decided I want to do this for other people. That freedom and that liberation and that ability to look in the mirror and not just judge myself negatively. Like I
Mhm.
can walk by a mirror today and just be like, I love you, girl.
Mm.
Right? Where in the past, I would see myself and be like, oh, my face is so round and look at my belly and like just pull myself apart bit by bit until I wanted to avoid the mirror altogether. So knowing that literally the smallest thing of walking by the mirror and loving the woman on the other side has changed not just my coaching, but the way I interact with my children, the way I interact with my husband, the way I interact with my friends. Um, I just want other women to feel that comfort of being at peace in their body because everything else opens up.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. There's so much of that that I think, I mean, I personally relate to, and I'm sure a lot of people listening relate to. And I think a lot of us have that experience. I'll just speak of women for now. I know men have their own issues when it
Yeah.
comes to body confidence and body dysmorphia and expectations that are placed on them. But just thinking of women, I think 'cause that's what I know more about, but I think that's super true. Like just these expectations that are placed on you and the way in which then you start to give away. It's like your opinion of yourself doesn't really matter as much, or you can't trust it as much. And
Mhm.
that really messes with you in so many facets of your life. So it sounds like the work that you're doing isn't just at the level of like your physical well-being in terms of how you look, but it's like
Mhm.
so much deeper than that. And how do you even show up as a person in your relationships, in your life? How do you, yeah, like what kind of role model are you for other
Mhm.
people as well? Similarly, I think I was raised by a lot of women who really wanted me to love myself, but they didn't really know how to do that for themselves. So
Mhm.
it's like the message that I was receiving wasn't the same as what I was seeing. And so I think I was better off than them because they were raised by a woman who didn't love herself and also criticized them. So it's like, okay,
Right.
progress was made.
Mhm.
But still those mixed messages of like, seeing women in your life constantly nitpick at themselves and put themselves down and criticize themselves, and the way in which that attracted for them people in their life that treated them that way.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
accepted that kind of treatment because how do you tell someone not to treat you in a way that is already normal for yourself? You're
Mhm.
already nitpicking at yourself. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on kind of like the
Yeah.
relationship part of it all?
I think that that part is so difficult because there's a point that you get to when you really see yourself, right? When you really shed everybody else's like not just expectations but criticisms and negativity, like when you get to the point where you just see you, all that stuff falls away, right? I have zero weight on my shoulders today that is related to what somebody else told me. Zero. I don't carry it.
Mhm.
But that part is where it kind of opens up a different struggle because now you're looking at the people in your life and you're saying, damn, I wish they could get an ounce of the freedom that I feel, right?
Mhm.
I wish they could see themselves the way I see them. But you recognize that their journey is their journey and you don't have the right to try to force your healing on them, right? You
Yeah.
literally just have to exist as you and plant seeds by simply living. But I feel like it brings on almost a sense of loneliness at first because you
Mhm.
start to feel like I love these people but I don't belong, right?
Mhm.
these people are my family and they are so important to me, but they don't see me. They see who they think I am, but they don't
Mhm.
get to know who I am.
Mhm.
And it's very confusing because you're also saying to yourself, I used to be kind of stuck with that mask on too. I used to
Yeah.
see the world through that lens as well.
Yeah.
So there is this loneliness to an extent. There is compassion for them because you recognize that they can only love you to the extent in which they love themselves.
Mhm.
Um, but there's also this new level of compassion because you get to recognize how much of the things that they say and the things that they feel aren't really even in alignment with who they are either. Those thoughts were given to them as well, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like in that relationship piece, there's a lot of extra self reflection that has to go in there. There's a lot
Yeah.
of extra self compassion that has to go in there. And the
Yeah.
more compassion you have for you, the more compassion you hold for them. But also, then that's when you learn a little bit about boundaries too, right? I love you. I recognize that you see things differently than me. When you say those things, it hurts me. So I'm not having these conversations,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like it's that whole mix of grace and growth and compassion and
Mhm.
boundaries all
Mhm.
sprinkled together.
Totally. Totally. And even in a positive way, like what you were
Hmm.
saying about, so I've always been very thin my whole life. And
Hmm.
so I've always been very complimented for being super thin.
Yeah.
And even my nickname growing up had to do with the fact that I was thin.
Hmm.
And so obviously you understand these things and you're like, yeah, obviously that kind of messed with like my sense of
Yeah.
identity and like my
Hmm.
worthiness and my value in life and society. And once I worked through so much of that and understood like, that I was worthy and I was valuable and all those things, there's still days and times where old thought mechanisms kind of kick in, right? Like if I feel a little bloated or if the clothes don't fit me the same way, like it kicks in a little bit. And so I'm still sensitive to some comments. And even when it comes to people complimenting me for being thin, I know that they say it, I know that they mean well when they're saying
Right.
that. I know that they intend it as a compliment, but and unfortunately I have the skills to do this, but even now to this day, I've had to ask a few people in my life, like very kindly, because I used to get mad and react whatnot, but now very kindly, I'm like, listen, I know you mean super well by that, but I really need you to not compliment me on my thinness because what you don't realize is that that compliment goes so far within me and it literally affects the way that I eat, the way that I talk to myself, the way that I exercise. Like, I know that there's a whole cycle that it just exists within me, and I have to learn to manage it and not, feed into it. But I also know that it's like if someone turns on that machine, it'll just go in automatic. And I do need to protect, I don't know how to describe it better, but it's like I need to make sure no one turns on the button that turns on that
Yeah.
machine
Yeah.
because it's a vicious cycle that then takes a lot of work to get out of. And it takes
Hmm.
a lot of work to like remind myself, like, no, you are worthy, you are valuable, not, and these people love you not just because you're thin, they love you for a bunch of other things. But I think that we do live in a society where, people often just kind of praise what they see rather than going a little bit deeper and getting to know
Hmm.
like who's the person.
Yeah. I think it even goes to say that our society praises what they see, but also they fear what they can't. Like
Mm,
when when we can talk about bias and everything else that comes along with these thoughts that are rooted in fear, but people focus on the exterior because to acknowledge the inside is painful, right?
mm,
So why would somebody want to bring up things that hurt them when they can keep every conversation superficial and just get by? Because
that's
you
so true.
can, right? Like you
Hmm.
can live life on autopilot. You can go to work, make your money, talk about the weather, talk about the media, talk about whatever you saw on Facebook, and
Yeah.
never have to go deeper than that ever. And you can skate
Mm,
by pretending once in a while your feelings might come up, you shove them back down and you replace it with something superficial. That's what 90% of what I see either online or even when I'm with family, the conversation stays superficial. So I feel like I remind myself that people almost make it a priority to keep things superficial because they are not ready to do the work that goes deeper than that. So complimenting you on your body, to them, they're saying, I just said something that made her feel good.
Mhm.
When really you're at a point in your life where how you look is not what makes you feel good.
Right.
Right. So it's a
Right.
them. It's like I feel like it's a constant reminder of this is a them issue. This is
Mhm.
something that they are attached to, but I'm not anymore.
Mm. That was so insightful. That,
Mm.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've noticed as well, like there's people that you get to a point where you don't identify with that mask anymore, right? And so
Mhm.
you do get deeper, you do the work. And then when you try and reconnect with the people when you used to have that mask on, it becomes very different. It becomes challenging to reconnect with someone at this new level because maybe they don't know how to get to that depth. Maybe it's too
Mhm.
uncomfortable for them. And it becomes very challenging to maintain certain relationships at the same level that you used to when they're not able or willing to go there, because
Mhm.
then you're not able to create that same intimacy that you used to feel like you had with those people, even though maybe it was superficial, whatever, like that
Right.
connection that you felt like you had with them.
Mhm.
It's hard because yeah, like there's times where like I'm in presence of people that I used to feel super connected to, and now I'm just like, I feel like we're in the same room, but we're in two completely different worlds. And that can feel, like you said, super isolating and really challenging, I think, for people to
Yeah.
navigate because you start to maybe think like, oh, I'm the problem or something. I'm just like not as fun
Mhm.
or as interested or whatever as I used to be. And it's like, no, you're actually taking a really beautiful path in your life that is probably helping you in so many ways. It's just that the you're going in a new direction and you can't force
Mhm.
these people to go in that same direction. If they choose to
Yeah.
come, amazing, wonderful. And if they don't, then yeah, boundaries is it just distance with love. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
Yeah. I think also like being able to recognize that not everybody in your life is meant to serve all parts of your life, right? Like
Hmm.
like my husband, for example, I love that man. He's my favorite human being. He is. Even when he makes
Yeah.
me mad, okay, even when I'm mad, he's still my favorite.
Yeah.
But if I sat down and talked to him about funnels or emailing my list or trying to launch a program, he would look at me like I had 12 heads, right? He cannot be my person for that. So
Yeah.
therefore, I leave those conversations out. I talk a little bit
Hmm.
about it, right? But I
Hmm.
don't go to him for that. The same way when I see members of my family who have to keep things superficial for their own, the own part of their journey right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The things that I want to talk about, like this conversation, would not be welcomed there. So I don't
Hmm.
have it, right?
Yeah.
Like I kind of recognize now that my peace is really rooted in meeting people where they are. Like for me, outgrowing relationships does not have to equate to cutting them off.
Yes.
It's different now,
Yeah.
right? But also,
Yeah.
like, the alternative would be to betray myself and shove
Hmm.
myself into a little box and pretend that I
Hmm.
haven't grown. Like
Hmm.
that's not even a possibility. So I will meet people where they are. I will always show love. If I feel uncomfortable, I will leave, right? Like boundaries don't even always have to be spoken out loud. Sometimes it's a matter of when people start gossiping, for example. I can't stand gossip. I can't stand sitting around and talking about somebody else's pain as if it's dinner conversation. I don't have to say to them, don't gossip in front of me. I don't have to do that. I can just remove myself. That is a
Hmm.
boundary, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of just like recognizing that not everybody can play a role in all parts of who you are, and you meet them where they are. If that relationship is important to you, then you meet them where they are, and maybe you're not as vulnerable, maybe you don't have deeper conversation, but you do what you can, what feels good to you, and then you save the rest for the people that do make you feel comfortable in being vulnerable.
Hmm. Totally, totally. And I think it's even loving to yourself to remove yourself from those situations without, and sometimes I agree with you, without even saying anything,
Yeah.
because genuinely, obviously, there's times where you need to say something that makes
Hmm.
100% sense, but there's a lot of times where you can just remove yourself without saying anything because it's just it's like more respectful to yourself in a sense because you know there's people in your life that you know. And as I say this, if you're when you're listening, you know who you're talking like in your head, I'm sure those people are popping up and you're like, yep, these are the people. You know that if you say something, you know how they're gonna react, you know how it's gonna be interpreted or be received. And it's just gonna cause more conflict, which is exactly what you're probably trying to avoid.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I also am at a point now where I recognize like just because I've chosen to do all this work doesn't mean that you have to.
Hmm.
Because how disrespectful of me to do all this work and now go tell you that actually there's something wrong with you and you need to work on yourself. Because to
Yeah.
someone who doesn't speak this lingo, all they hear is a shit ton of criticism.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's super unfair to someone that you love to just walk
Hmm.
around on your high horse and be like, and listen, I did this, so I'm not saying this as like been there, done that, probably still do it a few times, working on it. But I've now learned like it's super disrespectful for me to walk around and tell people like, this is actually where you could be better in your life.
Yeah.
This is actually what you could improve on. Like, no one wants to hear that.
Hmm.
And if they haven't done the work, it's probably because they're not ready to do it. So
Hmm.
don't burst their bubble because who knows what's in that Pandora's box? You're surely not going to clean up that mess once you open it up. I know
Hmm.
that once my Pandora's box opened, a lot of stuff came out of there, and only a trained professional knew how to
Yeah.
handle that.
Yeah. I think it's also super important to look at it as the difference between love and control, right? When you
Yeah,
love someone, when you love someone, you hold compassion for where they are in their journey. You give them grace when they make mistakes, obviously without overstepping your
of course.
boundaries, but you give
Yeah,
them grace. You give them permission to just be who they are and allow them to figure out their next steps on their terms, right? That's love.
yeah,
Control is you need to work on yourself.
yeah.
Control is you should read this book because you need to learn this. Control
Mhm.
is why don't you listen to podcasts, right? Control is why don't you go get a therapist?
Yeah.
And I get it. Like when we get to those points, it's because we want growth for them. But we
Mhm.
always have to remember that the reason that feels so important is because we're still basing our identity on how we're relating to them, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm trying to control a relationship out there and say, this is happening and you need to do something, you need to change, you need to do better, it's because if you did better, I would feel better about this relationship. I would feel
Exactly.
better about who I am when I'm with you, when really
Exactly.
my job is to always work on me. And if that plants a seed for you, beautiful.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, it's still my job to work on me.
Yeah. 100%. And if I can just add, it's like if I, as you were saying, if I am trying to control you, it's because of the relationship I want to have with you and how that makes me feel. I think in the same token, it's if I control you and I make you change so that you are like me, now I don't have to set boundaries with you. Now I don't have to risk anything. Now I don't have to make hard decisions and hard choices.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the
Mhm.
day, again, it's still about me. So
Yeah.
me telling you that you need to change when we're coming from that place has nothing to do with the other person. It has
Yeah.
way more to do with me.
Yes.
And so it's quite narcissistic as well in a sense and and self-centered to try and impose on someone else something that they're supposed to change
Yes.
because like you said, and I know in my experience, when we decided to start looking into support and coaching and therapy and help was when we felt like it was the right time in our lives to do
Yeah.
that. It
Mhm.
wasn't because someone else told us, "Hey, Evelyn, you should get off this diet yo-yo. You should start you should start seeing a coach."
Exactly, exactly. And I think the other part of that is that when we try to make other people change, it really is kind of just us refusing to take accountability for what we feel, refusing to take accountability for what decisions we know we need to make, right?
Mm.
Maybe it is, I need to distance myself in this relationship. But instead of me saying, you don't want to, right? That hurts. I
Yeah.
don't want to do that. I don't want to make a decision that I think is going to be painful. So you need to change. I don't
Yeah.
want to leave you. I don't want to walk away from here. So you change.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you're literally taking all the responsibility off of yourself and putting it onto somebody else, essentially making them responsible for everything that you are and everything that you feel,
100%.
which doesn't make any sense at the end of it. Because really, like, right, when you start thinking about it logically and you're like, holy shit, this whole time I have been putting out there these feelers of you need to change and live life my way,
Yeah.
right? But really, the message I was sending to myself was you don't see yourself as worthy of making decisions for yourself still. And there goes more inner work.
That's so beautiful. Yes, yes, 100%. I love how I'm just kind of like listening and absorbing and
Mm,
processing because I love how you articulate all of this
mm,
so nicely. I think it's super helpful to kind of understand it like this. And
yeah,
obviously, at the end of the day, like, these concepts, they're good to understand. And then obviously on a case by case basis, you figure out like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And I think
mhm,
that's when like you do call Evelyn and you say, okay, how can you help me? Like,
yeah,
do all this
yeah,
stuff, really implement it into practice. Because it's not easy. And,
mm-mm,
we make a lot of mistakes and I mean, I joke around now about like, oh yeah, I used to be like that, but like I really had to come to terms with that of like, oh my God, Francesca, like you walked around judging and criticizing people for years and you were on
guilty.
your guilty and you were on your high horse of like, look at me, I'm in
Yeah,
therapy, I'm so
yeah,
smart, blah blah blah. And it's
uh-huh,
like that was so disrespectful. Like, that's not okay. And like I laugh now probably out of nervousness, but like, I had to also practice some self-forgiveness with myself of like,
yes,
listen, that's not okay. Like you can't do that. And you do need to take responsibility for your decisions and for the boundaries
mhm,
that you need to set in your life and let people live their life. And
yes,
I think it's way harder said than done because when you talk about let the person at Starbucks live your life, that's one thing. You interact
right,
with them for 5 minutes every morning. When it comes to your immediate family or your husband or your children that you're dealing with on a daily basis,
mhm,
that's a whole other or even with yourself, right?
mhm,
Because as hard as we are on those other people, that's how we're treating ourselves
mhm,
internally.
mhm. But I will say this, when you're on the other side of it, right?
Hmm.
And you really do fully embrace allowing people to just be who they are, magic happens in your relationships. Let me tell you something. I interact with my daughters in ways that people are always like, how do you guys do that? Like, because they are allowed to just be who they are. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be, I think you should be here. I think you should be this. I think you should be thinking this. Don't with the shoulds. And even with my husband, like I used to kind of ride that high horse a little bit and be like, you know, why don't you read books? And here, why don't I'd like leave a book somewhere and be like, maybe you should check this out, right? Like when I finally like also, okay, let me go back and just say that I was raised in religion. I didn't have
Mm.
relationship with God. And it was when I left
Mhm.
religion that I found relationship. And I swear to you, one day I was praying and I just said, how could he, my husband, we'd been
Mhm.
going through this really, really difficult time. And I'm like, how could he have such a close relationship with someone who like indirectly tries to hurt me? Like,
Mm.
like, why is he doing that? Why is he
Yeah.
doing that to me? Right.
Yeah.
And I felt like in that moment, I heard God say so clearly, Evelyn, did I ask you to work on you, or did I ask you to make him better?
Mm.
I didn't tell you to do anything to him. I told you to trust me to guide him. Mind your
Mhm.
business, right?
Mhm.
Mind your business. work
Mhm.
on you. And I
Yeah.
feel like being able to look at my husband with compassion and recognize that he lives life with his whole heart, right? And he has lessons that he needs to unlearn. And he had, it is very difficult for men to be on a
Mhm.
growth journey when
Mhm.
they spent their entire lives being told they shouldn't feel, they don't need to
Yeah.
feel, that their job is to pay bills and like that's it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for him to be turning over this leaf and be seeing the depth of who he is, how dare I try to speed up the journey? Can I just hit fast
Yeah.
forward? Could you get here faster? Like
Yeah.
the beauty that has come to my marriage from me releasing expectations of who I thought he should be and just started to really nurture who he already was. And that only could come from me finally saying to myself, like, your job, Evelyn, is always to just be. And that's always enough, right?
Mhm.
If my intentions are pure every day, then every day I'm enough. And they
Cool.
get to see that too. And they get to live
Mhm.
that. And there's just this peace and comfort and connection that comes from releasing all of that. Because honestly, it was never even ours to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, how beautiful is it to like watch people once you release those expectations on them? It's like when you had them, it feels like things are moving so slow, like at the pace of
Mhm.
like the slowest turtle in the world, and they're also going in the wrong direction. And you also
Mhm.
know that there's a better direction that they should be going in, and why aren't they listening to you? And that whole thing. And like, how beautiful is it that like the second you finally truly release those expectations, things start to move so quickly. Like now I look at my partner and I'm like, whoa, like you have evolved like so much in so many ways
Mhm.
that I, in my small limited mind, because I am
Yeah.
not higher power, I am not God, I am not divine energy, I would have never predicted, I would have never known. Like my way was not the way that you were supposed to evolve into.
Mhm.
And how
Mhm.
beautiful to now be able to be in a relationship where I get to just like watch someone like continue becoming the best version of themselves. Like that's just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
It's such
And
a
it is
gift.
beautiful, like for you to even be
Yeah.
able to recognize it and see it and allow him to continue at his own pace, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just freedom in all of it.
Yeah. Okay, so few quick last questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we wrap up, I've prepared these since day one of filming this, but sometimes I get a little lost in conversation,
Yeah.
so we haven't been able to do them. So they're kind of rapid fire. I know they're a little bit big and important, but just whatever first thought comes to your
Okay.
mind, feel free to share.
Ready.
Number one, what does loving yourself mean to you?
It means that I get to be who God created me to be and just live in peace.
Beautiful. What's something you're working on right now?
Right now, I am working on, hmm, I'm working on fully embracing my voice so it can be heard where it needs to be heard.
Yes, girl.
Mm.
Number three, who or what inspires you the most in your journey towards empowerment?
Mm. I feel like that changes constantly. I see women inspire me constantly
Hmm.
to grow and be and strive and to want more. But on the day to day, it's my family and my home.
I had a
Literally,
feeling you would say that.
yeah. I mean, just
Yeah.
looking at them in the morning with a corny old good morning and a get mommy some coffee, like, right? I look at them and it makes me want to do better every day.
I love that. And last, what's your go-to self-care ritual?
Quiet, a good book, and depending on the weather, a glass of wine or a cup of tea. Um, just shutting everything down.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this conversation. This was really, I know it's going to be illuminating for who listens, but even for myself,
Mhm.
I was super excited to talk to you. And I was like, I know we're going to have just like, I know my soul's going to feel so
Yeah.
much, so nurtured after this conversation, and it does. So
Oh,
thank
I'm
you
so
so much
glad.
for being here. Where could our listeners find you?
So I'm mostly active on Facebook, just my name, Evelyn LeVasseur.
Mhm.
And we're redoing the website and all the things, but also I can be found at the Minding Mind podcast on all podcast platforms.
Amazing. And definitely go check them out. If you like this conversation, you're gonna like a lot of the
Yeah.
conversations you hear on there. Thank you again for being here. Thank you everyone for listening. As always, if you like what you heard, like, subscribe, do all the things. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast.